Alright, today we're going to talk a little bit about SQL for database managing. SQL is a pretty powerful tool when it comes to querying databases and getting data, updating data, retracting data, a lot of stuff that's very useful in terms of the professional world. So, a quick overview of SQL. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It can be used for a lot more things besides just querying data. It's used for database management in terms of the creation of databases, creation of database tables. What we're going to talk about today is using SQL to read rows and columns and update data within a data table and to sort the data that we query. Also, we can delete rows, we can insert rows, and we can join data. These are all pretty basic topics of SQL. However, today we're just going to cover reading, updating, and sorting. To start, some SQL keywords that I'd like to talk about that we're going to use today are select from, insert, delete, where, distinct, update, and order by. These are just the basic ones that we're going to use for reading and sorting and updating, but there are many more. One of the things that I want to point out is that these keywords are spelled in all capitals. This is not necessarily needed by the syntax, however, it is very useful when you're trying to distinguish your keywords from the names of your data tables or the elements that you're choosing. So generally, I like to write my keywords in all capitals, and that's usually what you'll see if you look up SQL code. The keywords will be spelled in all capitals, so that's what we're going to do today. First off, I'd like to talk about reading rows and columns. For reading rows and columns, we're going to use the keywords select, from, and where. Now, before we get started, we can talk about databases for a little. Databases are a database is basically made up of one or more tables of information, and these tables have rows and columns, as you can see here. The supplier ID, supplier name, contact name, address, and city are all columns within this data table, and there are multiple rows where each row represents one entry in the table. This is going to be very mandatory to understand this, because when we query data from our data table, we're going to be querying our information that we want via row and drawing out the specific details that we want of each row by specifying column names, in this case contact names and supplier IDs. And also for these examples, we're going to be using a data table which consists of a list of suppliers. As you can see, I have the data table over here too, with this kind of REPL-like page. We have the supplier ID, just so you can see the exact copy over here in the slides. So to start off, reading rows and columns, using select, from, and where. When we select data to read, we need to tell the database which columns of data we would like to specify and which table we would like to read from. You can see here, when we use select to select the information that we want out of a data table, we're going to select column names and column names from a specific table name. Now in this case, you can see over here, our data table name is called suppliers, and SQL has many kind of regular expressions and symbols that kind of represent data. As you can see the asterisk here. The asterisk actually represents everything. So when we write an asterisk, that means we want all of the columns, but we can specify column names. Let's see, if we run this code right here, this is what we'll end up with. We'll end up with a full table of all the information. I'll show you to expand it. It moves over a little further. And if we want to specify a specific column name, here next to select, we can post here. Let's say if we only want the supplier names, we can select just the supplier name column out of this table. We'll run, and here we just get the list of supplier names: Exotic Liquid, New Orleans, Cajun Delights, Grandma Kelly's Homestead, and Tokyo Traders, and so on. You can see that in our data table, these are just all the supplier names. If we want to specify more than one supplier name, we simply just need to add a comma and specify another one. Let's say we want the contact's name. And here you'll see now we have a full table of supplier name and contact name in the order that we specify them. Also, syntax note, all SQL queries end with a semicolon. That's how you can separate and do multiple queries in one step. Here you can see, select supplier name. We want this column, supplier name column. We want the contact name column from the table, which is called suppliers. If we want to see the whole table again, we can just simply query every column by using an asterisk. And here we have our full table. Just very basic in terms of getting information out of the table, pretty simple. We can also use the where keyword to specify which rows that we want. So for instance here, if we say, we want all of the columns here from our list of suppliers, we want every column from here when we query our suppliers. But let's say we only want one row. The syntax for the where keyword is we're going to specify a column name and with an operator and a value that we want to kind of limit our output to be. So for example, if I want to get all of the rows from table suppliers where, let's say we want all the information on Regina Murphy, I can say I want all the rows from suppliers where the contact name equals Regina Murphy. Looks like I spelled Murphy wrong. There we go. And here we'll get just Regina Murphy's data. We'll get all of the columns associated with her in the data table. Good for extracting one. If you know what you're looking for, it's good for extracting the data of all one person, not having to look for it. Let's say we want all of the entries where the supplier ID is less than 3. Once again, we can get all the rows out of the table by using the asterisk command from this table suppliers where supplier ID is less than, let's say, 5. We'll run SQL. And here you can say we have a short table of the supplier IDs that are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously 5 is not included because the less than sign is exclusive. But just another example of using the where clause to extract specific data out of the table. Let's talk a little bit about sorting data. Let me move this over. To sort data, we can use the order by keyword, and we use this keyword at the end of a query so that we can specify which column in the table we'd like to sort by. You can see here, this is our standard query, select column names from table names. We can also add a where clause in here if we're looking for specific elements, and we can use the order by keyword to order these entries by specific aspects within the columns, and we can choose to sort them in ascending or descending order. By default, SQL will resort to sorting everything in ascending order, and but we can specify to sort in descending order. And we can also sort by more than one column to specify. We can also sort by more than one column, which we won't get into today. But if let's say we have contacts with the same name and we want to sort them by their address beyond that, we can specify more than one column to sort by. So here we have our suppliers. We have our database of 4 suppliers because we selected all of the columns names from the table suppliers where the supplier ID is less than 5. And if we go down here and we add an order by clause, order by, let's say we want to order these by city. Now you can see that all of our data is sorted alphabetically by city. The first entry being Ann Arbor, the second entry being Landonia, New Orleans, and the entry from Tokyo. If we want to sort this in descending order, we can add the descending keyword here. And here we have the opposite. Now we're sorting by Tokyo. Now our list starts at 4 from the city of Tokyo to New Orleans, Landonia, and Ann Arbor. Very useful for sorting data, if you are managing a bunch of accounts and you are sorting, you want to see which accounts are doing better than others and you'd like to sort them by incoming revenue, that's a perfect example of when we would use order by. Once again, here's just another example. If we bring back our big table here, take out our where clause. Oh, looks like we have an error. 2 semicolons. We can use the order by clause. And let's say we want to order by supplier ID in descending order. And here you can see we have 29 entries in this table. Now we basically have the same table, just flipped upside down. Alright. Oh, here's a good thing to note. The sorting factor does not have to be present within the output of the query. So if we would like to sort by supplier ID, but we only want to select the contact name, you can see we receive a list of all the contact names. They're all sorted by their supplier ID, but the supplier ID is not actually present in the visible table. That's pretty interesting to note. There's a lot of other little hidden things like that you can play around with beyond just this lecture. To update data. Updating data is definitely the trickiest thing that we'll talk about. To update data in a database, we use the update commands. The update keyword modifies fields within a table. It can't add or delete fields. There are separate keywords for that. They're a little bit more complicated, so we're not going to get into it. To update the data in a table, first we need to specify the table name that we would like to update, and then we'd like to set the column, we'd like to tell SQL which columns that we'd like to update, and we would like to tell it which values we'd like to update within that table. So here, if we come down here, we have the syntax right here, table name, the column names that we'd like to look at, and the column names that we're changing, and the column names that we're looking at. Here we say we're going to update the table suppliers, and we're going to set contact name John Fogarty, where the contact name equals Charlotte Hooper. So we're going to start off, our first entry is going to look like this. It's going to look like we have Charlotte Hooper right here, where the contact name is Charlotte Hooper. We would like to set that contact name to John Fogarty. So the output of this SQL query right here, I'll show you for example. If we want to see our whole table, here's our whole table. I actually already changed this when I was going over it, but here I'll show you again. If we'd like to, you can see here the table name for exotic liquid says John Fogarty. If we'd like to change this, we can say update suppliers table, and we'd like to set contact name equals Charlotte Hooper. We'll change it back. Where contact name equals John Fogarty. Semicolon. And one thing to notice too is that SQL doesn't care about white space. You can see here I can hit enter as many times. White space does not affect the query. Let's see what I do here. Where contact name suppliers here. I misspelled the table name. Perfect. You can see we've made data changes to the database with one row is affected, and if we query the database again, You can see that the contact name has changed from from John Fogarty to Charlotte Hooper. That's a quick example of how the update command works. Has a little more had a little more keywords in it, a little more operators. Kind of tricky how the first thing that it wants you to specify is what you'd like the new address to, what you're looking for the new data to say, and then you specify where it currently exists. I thought that was a little thrown off. In my opinion, I think that it would be easier to read if we specify first what we'd like to change and then what we're changing it to. But however, the set command comes first, and we specify what we're changing to and then what we're changing. So in summary, SQL is a leading language in database manipulation. Examples of some uses in the professional world are finance records, account management, patient information, and stuff like fingerprint and DNA-based databases.